What's up, dudes and dudes here, and my name's Scyushi, and we are back into more Trove to Trove, and this is going to end up being a video where we deep dive into this puppy right here, which is going to end up being this this little bit of the shield that goes over our health bar. It's called Combat Block. So this is the block stat that the developers ended up kind of talking about in their last live stream. And frankly speaking, there's some good to it, there's some bad to it. Let's get into it. But before we do, be sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe if you haven't already, but I know most of you already have. So this is essentially going to be the same as having Death Defying equip, with a couple small differences. Basically, when you end up interacting with this, it's going to end up giving you a certain amount of shield onto your character, which basically means that I can take 23 fatal hits before I end up losing that shield, and then I would die. Couple points of interest is that the shield stat itself is class specific. So if I swap to my Draco, you can see I have no shield, but also if I consume this, you can see I have significantly more shield. And that's because the shield stat actually scales off of your max health, your health regen, and your stability. So it actually means that those stats suddenly become a lot more useful on gear for a lot of reasons. The main thing that the developers are trying to focus on with this block thing is they think that it's going to affect melee characters. But the fact is it's actually going to affect everyone, because in most cases, melee classes can just use Death Defying. Problem solved, right? Well, the key difference between the block and Death Defying is that when your Death Defying automatically triggers, it will heal you as if you consumed a flask. The block does not, which means that if you stand in lava and you don't have any health regen going on, you will just fire tick your health down or your shield down 1 per second. So it can just absolutely melt it. So don't use your shields if you're going to end up going into a lava world or just chilling in lava or anything like that, or at least be a little bit more cautious in terms of your health. But anyways, having the higher stat or higher stability, health regen, whatever, could potentially end up changing how we do builds on a lot of our classes, because now it's suddenly more valuable in our gear. And the reason why this stat is going to become very valuable is because there are a few very selective abilities in this game that will actually one-shot you through Death Defying. The most common one most people know, Ephira, the D12, D13, Leviathan. Basically, it has this spin attack that'll just kill you outright. This will actually block it. More importantly, that less people know about, more so this is like end gamers, the D15 lobsters or crabs or clam enemies or whatever, they basically will end up putting this like spiky vine shield around them that is thorns. So as soon as they activate that, it means that as soon as you're damaging them and they have that effect, you are literally like having your damage reflected back at you. You're still hurting them, but you'll also hurt yourself. And since players will deal significantly more damage to other players than we do with enemies, just because of the way that the stats work in this game, you basically just shred yourself and kill yourself almost instantly. And that is another thing that goes through Death Defying. But the block stat prevents that. And at first, I didn't like the idea of like, I was on my Shadow Hunter and I thought, oh man, I only get 23 of these. That's terrible. And then when I actually read the patch notes and saw that it scales up based off of your other stats, I was like, oh, okay. Now, the thing is, you're still going to have to build your character towards raw damage, because otherwise, why would you be getting this shield in the first place? Nobody who's anywhere near any aspect of this game should touch the block stat unless you are exclusively in D15 or going to super deep delves. And that's the delves example is only if you're fighting bosses that specifically will one-shot you through Death Defying. I don't know if the depth tentacle monster one-shots you through Death Defying, because I've never fought it. But suffice to say, there are very, very small instances where this becomes useful. Because, unfortunately, it's going to cost CUBITS and block element, but it's going to cost CUBITS which is a time-gated resource, and they haven't overhauled the amount of cubits that you obtain for years. Ever since I started playing, I think they only changed it maybe once. So yeah, chop devs, it's about time that you make it so that we can just farm cubits, even if at a very low rate. Just make it infinite. Because there's too many things in the game that already drain your cubits, let alone a temporary buff, just so that you don't get one shot by some dumb clams. And again, to really hammer this home, you don't actually need to have the block ability if you're just farming the elemental worlds, because the only reason you would get it is if you're specifically farming the 5-star dungeons that are in D15. Because that's the only place that that crab can spawn. So if you're just doing normal elemental dungeons, then you don't need the block. So this is literally a stat that's been added into the game, or an ability or feature or what. This has just been added for like 5, 10, 1% of the game. And it frustrates me to no end, because I feel like the devs, like this being added into the game in the way that they've implemented it, tells me one thing. The developers are so detached because they don't play this game, so they have no idea. Because the fact that they're trying to, I don't want to say monetize, but it takes like daily resources that are time gated in order to actually apply this buff. Like, that's stupid. It should just cost an in-game like resource. Like, it should just cost the block element, not cubits and block element. At least if it was block element, it's an easy enough resource that we can get, because you can get Gearcrafter vaults from normal dungeons and stuff. And it's something that you could actually take advantage of even at the early game before you have Death Defying. But as it stands right now, this is a specific, very niche skill that I can't recommend anyone to use, save for if you're farming very specific dungeons in a very specific section of the game. Which is disappointing, because I actually think that the feature as a whole is pretty cool. And if they ended up just removing the qubit cost and it just cost block element, and not a lot of block element either, it needs to be like relatively priced, but not developer priced, where no normal player in their right mind could get it. It needs to be something that's easy enough to get that you can take advantage of it as an average player, rather than something that you have to like go out of your way to farm for, you know what I mean? But again, if it was block element, I mean, you're already getting these from every dungeon anyways, so it honestly wouldn't even be that bad. But anyways, I digress. Point being, it's a really cool idea, executed very poorly, and unfortunately for 99% of the game, we've already got Death Defying anyways, save for like 2 or maybe 3 enemies, and that's the only reason that this is useful. Now, again, to reiterate, if you have a ton of max health and stability and stuff, the devs example that they gave in the patch notes was that you could have a knight, for example, or one of the tankier classes in the game, that could go up to like 1,000 shield. And considering that for every 1 tick is fatal damage, that is a lot. That is a lot of like keeping you alive in D15 from the clams and stuff like that. So again, it would have a lot of value depending on certain classes and certain factors, but only in one specific case, which is unfortunate, because when they talked about blocking as a feature, I was wondering, are we going to have a dedicated button to block? Are we going to be able to put up a Smash Bros shield where we actually have to time our attacks or something? Or I thought at the worst, it would just end up being a new stat where the higher your percentage in that stat, the more chance of an enemy just having their attack blocked for a percentage of damage or something. Like Path of Exile, where if you have enough block, you block like 75, 90% damage. That would actually be really cool. But instead we've got this, which is very odd. Anyways, thanks for watching. Smash like, sub for more, buy the merch you want to support the channel. What do you guys think? Sound off in the comments. Of course, this is the test server, so it is all subject to change. My advice would be to go and yell at the devs in the Discord and tell them to change the cost so that it just didn't cost cubits. I'm okay with it costing a decent amount of block element, because again, it's an easy enough resource to it's not necessarily an easy resource to farm. It's a resource you can consistently farm while you're just doing everything else in the game, like namely farming dungeons. So that's where I could see its benefit. But the fact that it costs cubits as well is just terrible. Like, unless it costs like 5 or 10 cubits, in which case, why does it cost cubits in the first place?